Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the iNACOL Blended and Online Learning Symposium. It is our 10-year anniversary of iNACOL, right? Woo! September 23rd, 2003. Just think of this, 17 people. They were from school districts, regional education service agencies, and state departments of ed, doing something at the time seemed radical, serving hundreds, even thousands of kids in 2003, about 50,000 students in their states, in their districts, with a whole new opportunity, taking advantage at the time, the way they were writing about it, using the internet to deliver educational opportunities never before possible for these students. And when I stand up here and I look around and I see more than 2,300 committed individuals, educators, to transforming the future of education to student-centered learning, realizing the promise that technology delivers, realizing the potential that is out there. And we have a long road to go. But if you think that 17 people got together with that vision, and one by one, each of you has realized what you can do in your own communities. We must transform education for our kids. Blended and online learning are powerful, powerful innovations, and we know this is inevitable. And it's not just happening here, it's happening all over the world. Our colleagues from across the globe are joining us today. But I read this story last month. How many of you saw this in the New York Times? Batu Shig, the story about Batu Shig from Mongolia. Batu Shig was 15 years old last year, and his principal in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, decided that he wanted the students in his classrooms, in his high school, to have access to more STEM opportunities. And so he enrolled these 15-year-olds in the MIT Electronics and Circuits course. This is a sophomore level MIT course, and it was the first MOOC offered at MIT. So Batu Shig, then 15, took the course. There were 150,000 people around the globe enrolled in this open course. Batu Shig was one of 340 perfect scores in the course. And Batu Shig said, I had never done that kind of thing before. It was a watershed moment for me. He would go home when he was taking the course, and he would translate all of the lessons into Mongolian for the rest of the students in his class. But who's the real hero in this story? That principal. The principal that had the vision that even in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, the students in his class could access a sophomore level circuits and electronics class from MIT, take that class. He brought a lab within the school so the students could interact, have the hands-on experiences, but have access to that education. The other story here is that in the past decade, Mongolia, with the limited landlines that they had, has invested heavily in their 3G networks. Almost every home, almost every person has access to high-speed internet, information technology infrastructure. Because of this, most homes in Ulaanbaatar have high-speed internet connection. Most everyone, including those nomads out on the steppe, have at least one cell phone. Even on the steppe with the sheep only in sight, you can get a signal. Countries around the globe are investing heavily in these information technology networks for the purposes of economic development and for the purposes of expanding access to education. And we have to ask ourselves, how many Batu Shigs do you have in your community? How many opportunities can we open up to engage the interest and passion of our students in ways never before possible? It's happening here, it's happening inside of school, it's happening outside of school, and it's happening around the world. I was reading about 2 months ago, and I ran across a quote from Dr. Martin Luther King. "The arc of moral universe is long. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." There are lives, so many lives in our communities. How many lives are we capable of changing? How can we shut down the cycle of poverty that we have in our communities? How can we transform the education system around the globe? Each individual, each one of these lives. Aaron, who you saw in the student panel last year from Chicago, from Voice, the first person in his family to go to college. The first person in his community to go to college. Elizabeth from rural Kentucky, many years ago, 10 years old, had never been challenged in school. She had already skipped a grade, still not challenged in school, was given the opportunity through online courses and digital curriculum to stay with her friends in her face-to-face school, her peers, her age group, and get challenged and have access to new learning opportunities, that self-blend. Shaquille from Pennsylvania, who sat in school, a little ADD, raising his hand all the time, the teachers just started to shut down, found new opportunities through online and blended learning to engage him, to let him work at his own pace, to have that flexibility. And there's students all over the world. When traveling in the EU, students in Portugal have access to online learning. Those travelers, those gypsies going across, migrating around the country, have access to education. Every country, every community does this for their own reasons to improve education. But fundamentally, it's about transforming to student-centered learning and doing what is right for kids. So that 15-year-old Badushig that you saw in the jungle gym in Mongolia, now MIT is his backup college when he decides to apply to school, right? Just think about what this means. In my lifetime, I believe we have a window of opportunity to really shift practice, instructional models, as well as policy, to help create these unprecedented, transformed student-centered learning opportunities through online and blended learning. One of the things that I'm seeing in terms of trends as I look across the education landscape is that a lot of people are getting excited about this, and that's fantastic. A lot of people are getting involved. They're starting new programs. I think one of the things that we have to be very careful about as a field is to be very clear about the terminology we use. Student-centered learning, personalized learning, blended learning, online learning, competency-based learning, mastery-based learning. And so I think it's important to go through and be really clear about what we mean and what we say, because it has impacts on how we implement these new transformed student-centered instructional models. And I'll start just by pointing to a few resources. Students at the Center is a project for jobs of the future. And their definition of student-centered learning, and you start to see how these ideas fit together, for transforming to student-centered learning, these elements of student-centered approaches, it's an approach. It's an approach to learning, and it challenges the current models of school. It embraces the child, the adolescent's experience, and learning theory as the starting point. It harnesses the full range of learning opportunities anytime, any day of the week, any day of the year. It expands and changes the role of the educator, and it determines determines advancement and progression based on mastery. So think of those 4 things in terms of framing student-centered learning when you're looking at making this transformation. Today, iNACOL is releasing a paper to integrate the ideas of personalized learning, blended learning, competency-based learning, and standards to help bust out of our thinking and some of the confusion and fuzziness that are in using these words. We must create and sustain breakthrough new personalized learning models using blended and online learning. Personalized learning is really about allowing students to take ownership. It's about student voice and choice. It's about students given the opportunity to feel valued, motivated, in control. It also changes the dynamic between the teacher and the student. Personalization is about a lot of ideas. It's about discovering students' prior knowledge and experience and how they experience the content, meeting them where they are. It's about guiding students to make healthy academic decisions, developing learning communities inside of school, outside of school, that celebrate the individual, their individuality, and the contributions of each and every student. It's about empowering teachers and students with data for differentiation. But the 2 key things are really that student voice and choice and the transparency of data that can happen in these new personalized learning models. iNACOL did a survey of the field on personalization, and these are actually power ranked, with 1 being the highest ranking. Number 1 in what is personalization, what is the value, what does it mean to your programs, from practitioners in the field doing this work. And number 1 is that student agency, that the student has voice and choice even on the level of the lesson for different kinds of content, different ways of learning that content, and different ways to show what they know. Number 2 is the differentiated instruction. Sometimes people use personalization and differentiation exchangeably. Differentiation is part of personalization, but personalization is a strategy and it is bigger. It's about immediate instructional interventions for kids when they don't get it and that support. It's about flexible pacing. You have to have individual student profiles or personalized learning maps, personalized learning plans for every single student to truly personalize learning. It involves deeper learning and that application of knowledge, problem solving, developing meaning, frequent feedback from their instructors and from peers. It is based on world-class standards, high standards for each and every student. And it allows anytime, anywhere learning, and includes performance-based assessments, project-based learning portfolios. So you may have seen a new report that is being worked on, some research. Last night at our awards ceremony, Scott Benson from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who won the Outstanding Individual Achievement Award, has done this research and has picked up 4 key attributes in the personalized learning programs that they have studied. And these are the 4 attributes. 1, learner profiles are key. This shows you individual skills, individual skill gaps, strengths, weaknesses, where their interests are, and the aspirations for each student. Number 2, that each student has their own personalized learning paths. Their goals and objectives are clear. Their learning experience across students are diverse, but they're matched to the individual needs of students. There are flexible learning environments, multiple instructional delivery approaches, and they continuously optimize the available resources in support of these students' learning. And number 4, individual mastery. You're continually assessing a student's progress along a progression against clearly defined standards and goals that are held high and consistent for each and every student. Students advance based on that demonstrated mastery. And so here is one of the schools that the Next Generation Learning Challenges grants has supported. This is Summit Denali in California. And what do you see here in terms of this description of personalized learning? Each one of these students is working based on their own learner profile, where they come in that day, they're setting goals, they've got their own personal learning paths. Each student has different experiences. Some of them are working together, some of them are working individually, but they're advancing based on mastery, meaning that as they take their time and have that flexibility and they're ready to be assessed, these are all over. There's a genius bar over in the side of this room, a genius-like bar with facilitators and teachers, and they can get help when they need it, or when they're ready to be assessed. No, it says learn and show. It's open 24 hours, right? It's open anytime the kids are in school. They are ready for assessment when they hit their learning targets. We have to do a better job of leveraging the technology for personalized learning. Assessments should always be open. They shouldn't be at a fixed point where there are variable amounts of learning. And we should allow kids to continue to move when they're ready. And so the last big idea around personalization is this anytime, any place. Blended schools, there's a blended school, Bronx Arena in New York. They have reached out to over 30 community-based organizations. So not only do they use digital content and tools in their blended environments, they are mastery-based. They have a whole range of pathways for students to move through the material, but they are connected to all of these organizations in their communities so that students have that support inside and outside of school. They have mentorships, they can work in museums and internships. They have different resources from community-based organizations, communities and schools, other programs. Real personalized learning is integrating the entire community into and around the students' learning needs and providing a whole range of services. It is really difficult to imagine being able to do this kind of student-centered, personalized learning without technology, right? I mean, how can you truly personalize learning if you are not effectively using technology? And this is where the tools in blended learning and in online learning can support flexible pacing, differentiated instruction, anytime, anywhere learning, immediate interventions. But we have to understand the nuanced differences between these words and what they mean and what it means when we set up our instructional environments. I'm sure you have heard this. I have heard so many times in the last year where somebody tells me they're doing blended learning, and it's nothing more than dropping a bunch of tablets into a classroom with almost the exact same instructional model, right? We are talking about a transformation to student-centered, personalized learning, and blended learning itself is a powerful modality. It is a powerful delivery model. It is a rational approach and a bridge that can get us from old traditional systems to powerful new models for personalizing instruction. Oops. So Michael Horn and Heather Staker's definition of blended learning is really important to help level set our understanding. It's any time a student learns, at least in part, in a supervised location, away from home, and at least in part through delivery online with some element, and I think this is the most important part of this definition, with some element of student control over time, place, path, and/or pace. And there are a number of ways that technology is integrated into the classroom that may create some engagement, it may do some interesting things, but unless it helps give students that voice and choice and some control, it is not making that instructional model shift that is required in blended. And they just added this third piece to the definition this year. The modalities along a student's learning path within a course or subject are connected, that connectivism, to provide an integrated learning experience. And so this is a diagram that iNACOL did back in 2006. That you see the power that these online learning systems, when they were developed, learning management systems, content management systems, digital content, and more adaptive technologies, adaptive content, adaptive assessments, that formative assessment data that is going to allow us to differentiate every day and make the assessment piece invisible so that we can help personalize learning. But integrating these components of online learning into blended environments to fundamentally transform what we can do. Well, I was at a leadership development meeting about a month ago in Wisconsin, and we got on this analogy. Now, I have a very bad sense of direction. Those of you that know me and have ever been in a car with me have probably gone in what I call the theory of concentric circles and trying to get somewhere, using a GPS even. But without that GPS, I will end up in other states when I'm traveling, so I rely on the GPS. Well, we started talking about traditional environments for education and this once-a-year testing regime that we have. Why do we wait until April or May to find how far off course a kid is? This is crazy, right? What about a GPS-like system for learning? As soon as you make a wrong turn, you get redirected, you get an alert. It gives you your rate and time to destination, to success. And that, with a personalized learning map or student profile, could actually tell you different destinations. To graduation, how far are you on track? Do you need to speed it up? Do you need to get help? Are you really lost? Pull over and get some help and get some support. Look at these waypoints. Get the user reviews on the different content and stops along the way. But you could stay on track with a GPS-like system for learning. I think that's a really nice analogy for blended learning models. And if you're accelerating and you're moving ahead, you want to stay with your peer groups, stop by some waypoints, do some tourist visits, go deeper. So this idea that we could have regular feedback, know exactly where we are, what our rate is, what our time to destination is, and get the supports that we need to make sure we don't get lost and don't get off track. As soon as we make a wrong turn, we're back on track and we're supported. Blended learning is ultimately about optimizing what's possible in this explicit shift from classroom-level instructional design to personalized learning. So true blended learning is a modality and a fundamental shift in the instructional model towards this personalization. Oops. Sorry, I'm not used to this clicker. I keep hitting the wrong button. So blended learning is about the ability to personalize instruction. This is Samantha Sherwood. She's assistant principal in Brock's Arena that I was just talking about that's connected to all of those community organizations. And she says, the only way to do this blended learning and personalizing instruction is for teachers to use the data constantly to individualize that instruction and provide targeted feedback. It isn't about the tech. It's about the instructional model change. Blended learning is not about whether you are just giving a kid a computer. So this function of redesign the instructional model, we talk a lot about blended learning models at the school level. Let's focus in on what this redesigned classroom level instructional model looks like. And this is what we cover in our paper. It's not just a construct, it's a fundamental redesign with these characteristics. A shift from lecture to student-centered instruction. Students become more active. They become more interactive learners. And this shift applies to the entire course, including the online pieces and the face-to-face sessions. increases the interaction between students to students, students to instructors, students to other experts, and increases the interaction between students and outside resources. It has integrated formative and summative assessment. This integrated formative assessment and the ideas about adaptive content are so huge for where the future of learning is going around student-centered learning. And the research on blended learning supports this and highlights the increased importance of educators, the changing role of educators, which are really exciting for the profession. A teacher, not just as concierge, but as conductor, designer, coach, and learning engineer. On Wednesday, you're going to hear Rick Hess and Bror Saxberg talk about their new book, and it's about learning sciences and how we can empower teachers and principals and educators and leaders to become learning engineers of the future based on what we know about how kids learn. It's breakthrough. It's about breakthrough leadership and design. But teachers are becoming, we say facilitators of learning, and what does that mean? Constant monitors of progress, but just like a coach takes every single one of their players and maximizes their skills, maximizes their interests, they're graduation coaches to help guide in every area and move them along. And so in this new report, we talk about new learning model continuums. As you map your blended online program on this map, how much does it allow you to continue on with gaps in proficiency versus requiring the demonstration of competency to advance? How many opportunities are there within school and outside of school to demonstrate this knowledge? How much are you relying on traditional educator roles, and how much are you moving to these new changed educator roles as coaches, as facilitators? How much is it technology enhanced for new pathways? And is it sustainable at scale? This is a big question in terms of scaling up the future of education. And so we've talked about student-centered learning, what personalized learning looks like, how blended learning is a powerful modality to make this happen towards personalized learning. How does competency education fit in with this? Because people are using the term personalized learning and competency-based learning interchangeably, and they're not. But they are related, and competency education is foundational to these ideas of student-centered learning and to enable personalization. And blended learning environments should be constructed to support that and be mastery-based. So the idea that you can have student-centered competency education is true whether it's online or blended or even traditional. But as I said, I don't know how you could carry this out effectively without the use of technology. So that we're clear, we've developed this 5-part working definition with the field. Competency-based education, whether you use the term mastery-based or proficiency-based, standards-based, every state, every area, it's fine. Use your own terms. We are sticking with the term competency. That's what's been showing up in a lot of the federal race to the top and others. That's just the term we're going to use. Number 1, students advance only upon demonstrated mastery. Number 2, those learning objectives and goals are clear and explicit and meaningful to the student. They own their learning goals every day. Number 3, assessment is meaningful and a positive learning experience for the student. When they are not proficient or advanced, they get immediate feedback and they know why, and they know how to develop it to get to that point. What do those 3 things mean? It means that kids can't go on and show up in the 9th grade and have huge gaps because they're advancing based on mastery. They're demonstrating that. And when you fill in all of those gaps, then kids can continue on their trajectory and succeed. It is crazy to me that we have kids showing up in 9th grade or 10th grade that are on a 3rd grade reading level or a 4th grade math level or even a 7th grade reading level and an 8th grade math level. How is any teacher supposed to fill all those gaps on their own? And certainly without technology, with a single textbook in that grade level based on the kid's birthday? This is insane what we're asking people to do in traditional environments. New blended environments in high schools are starting to identify those gaps and fill those gaps and accelerate kids and get them caught up. And it is tough work, but it is the right work. It's about being honest with kids. It's about being really, really honest about where those gaps are and where they need to work. And working and being honest with kids takes a lot of courage, and it's tough. Those are tough conversations. These new blended schools that we're seeing are accelerating kids that much of society has given up on and getting them on track. They're the Aarons of Chicago, and they're getting them on track to graduate without gaps, proficient, ready to go, ready to succeed in society and in their careers and in college. Number 4 in competency-based environments is that kids have access and immediate differentiated support when they need it if they're not showing proficiency, and that's key. And number 5 is that these outcomes involve not just academic skills, but competencies, problem solving, application of knowledge, those higher level thinking skills and dispositions. So I love this quote from Oregon, but it talks about in a proficiency-based system, failure or poor performance is not an outcome. Today, our grading system allows kids with D's and F's to keep moving through, and they have huge holes. In a proficiency-based system, that may be part of their learning experience, but it's A, B, or try again. They have to keep working on it until they fill those gaps to advance. It may be part of a student's learning experience, but that is not an acceptable outcome. And so an example of this is another one of the Next Generation Learning Challenges grantees. It's USC Hybrid High in Los Angeles. And when USC Hybrid High in Los Angeles, first opened up, every student, when they came in, if you're going to deal with where every student is, you have to do an entry-level assessment. So every student that came in, where are they in math? Where are the gaps? And in 9th grade, how many 9th graders were on grade level or ahead? 0. 0. Coming in, South Central, Los Angeles, East LA, into USC Hybrid High, they came in anywhere from a 1st grade to an 8th grade level in math. How do you deal with that? Our school's dealing with that today, right? They had to deal with it. And so they developed this concept of when you come in, these were really hard conversations with the kids. They had to go there, they had to fill in the gaps, they had to get them up to speed, up to grade level in order to be successful. It's about, they worked with the students and they said, well, it's about dipping your toe into the math stream. You know that analogy, when you put your foot in the river, it never goes in the same place twice, right? This idea, you're dipping your toe into the math stream and everybody's going to be in a different place and we are going to work with you and we are going to get you up to where you need to go. And there were kids that had straight A's or A's and B's that had been told they were great students because they were compliant all their life, and they found out they were 4 grade levels behind in 9th grade. And those were not good conversations to have with the students or the parents, but they were honest. And the emperor wears no clothes when you're in a competency-based learning environment. You are focused on doing what is right to get every kid where they need to go. And what did they do? They had massive levels of growth to get these kids up to speed. And so that's an example, but competency-based learning, where you require every student to demonstrate proficiency in these systems, is foundational to enabling personalized learning, because kids can demonstrate those skills and learn those skills in all different ways. And blended learning as a modality should be based on the foundation of mastery-based or competency-based education. And competency education policies, moving away from seat time, are absolutely necessary for these new student-centered transformational models to take off. And in the US, there is a tremendous interest at the state policy level right now in moving away from seat time and giving flexibility or options or supporting schools to go to competency-based learning environments. And that is exciting. more than 36 states recently have enacted competency-based policies or legislation. And so where does standards fit in this? It was simply, we must have world-class academic standards and hold all students, each and every student, to those high standards. I love this quote from Chris Sturgis in The Art and Science of Designing Competencies. If you think of standards as the framework, as our mental models shift from time-based to competency-based, it is also important to move away from linear ways of going through the curriculum towards flexible pathways for learning. And that kind of pulls all of these ideas together. So iNACOL has recently released a new learning models vision that puts out these ideas. It is from the feedback in the community, from the work that you are doing, highlighting what is possible. And this is what the vision embodies. Our ultimate vision of blended and online learning lies in the potential for transformation. It did 10 years ago when our organization was started, and it continues today. We are focused on the potential to transform the education system around student-centered learning and believe these models must be competency-based. It is centered on the need for increasing world-class educational opportunities for all children, access, and equity. So ask yourselves about your instructional models. How is your program engineered to personalize learning? How do you enable student co-design and goal setting to the lesson level, to the course level? How do you provide greater transparency? How does your program transform instructional design to student-centered? And just to highlight some of the growth in this area of new learning models, the Next Generation Learning Challenges Grant Program, which iNACOL is proud to be a partner in, with EDUCAUSE, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, CCSSO, and the League for Innovation, right now has Wave 4 planning and launch grants for breakthrough school models. What is NGLC? It accelerates educational innovation through applied learning technologies to dramatically improve student outcomes. It is grants for new school models and grants, grant funding. It is research and evidence. There is a building research and evidence base around these NGLC programs that is going to help move the field forward in understanding what works, what are the implications, what are the costs and funding structures, what are the changing roles of educators, what kinds of supports, what kinds of tools and technology. The research component of this, which you may not see yet because it's happening, but the preliminary results are fascinating, and there'll be a few sessions on the cost and funding structures and on NGLC throughout the event. The third area is building a community of innovators and cross-pollinating those at the leading edge of these programs. So NGLC has distributed $42 million. There are 58 new breakthrough secondary models. Think about that. Just 5 years ago, we were struggling to name like 5 examples of new mastery-based blended schools that were emerging. And now we have half of all school districts in the US interested in these new models, 58 new breakthrough school models just through this program alone. So I wanted to alert you, there are 2 deadlines for new grants coming up, December 2nd and January 13th, for launch grants and for planning grants for new secondary models. So what is a breakthrough school? It's student-centered and student-owned. It meets the diverse learning needs of students. It is competency-based, and it is blended. It is optimizing the use of teacher and technology-delivered instruction in both group and individual work. And a breakthrough school is sustainable. Here are the outcomes that these schools are expected to achieve. 1.5 years of growth annually on Common Core state standards, deeper learning outcomes as defined by the grantees, 90% graduation rate for 4-year cohorts, 80% matriculation rate, and the school model is financially sustainable. And that picture is from USC Hybrid High. Those are the goals set at USC Hybrid High, and they are designing the entire instructional model around achieving those outcomes for kids. The design principles: student-centered, high expectations, mastery-based, blended, student ownership, sustainable, scalable to more and more students. And so you can go to the website, nextgenlearning.org, and check out more information. I would highly encourage you also to check out the Wave 3 and the Wave 4 profiles. There are videos, there are examples of these other models out there that can help you, whether or not you're interested in this program, in your community, sharing the ideas of what new learning models, what next-gen learning, what blended, personalized looks like. And so I'm going to wrap up with the enablers for these environments are rooted in what we can and cannot do in policy. Policy can be a huge driver, and policy can have tremendous barriers for what is possible in next generation learning. And what is this, right? It's time. It's our bell schedule. The biggest barrier continues to be seat time rules, line of sight rules that lock down how, when, where, the flexibility, the pacing of student learning. But seat time versus competency-based goes deep into the structures of our organizations. Moving to a competency-based environment starts to really show how the tyranny of seat time locks in so many other components. So moving away from seat time, why we measure, why we reward the number of minutes a student sits in a seat versus the amount of learning that happens with that student or competency or mastery still remains the most important piece we have to solve. And it gets rooted both in state policy and in federal policy around accountability and assessment. So in our state policies, they're starting to take this on, but there are still root seat time issues that draw in other parts of the model. Let me explain. What is this? There are huge issues in policy. I am all for accountability, but we've gone from having no accountability in standards back in the 1990s, only 11 states had standards, to No Child Left Behind to draw 50 states into standards, which was an important point in time in the US on a journey towards higher standards for all of our kids, but it has locked us into a way of thinking about accountability and assessment. Why do we have an accountability system that, based on a student's date of birth, at March or April or May, you get tested once a year? You don't get to see the true individual student learning growth. It's just the dipstick of where that student is at that time of year. There is a better way. There is a different way. And if we think deeply about competency-based education, where you have learner profiles, where you have information on student in every single standard, every single day, you have that GPS-like model, you can roll the data up. It is called subgroup of one. You can roll the data up every day and have an accountability system that truly looks of quality, is truly aligned to student-centered learning. And so what's happening today in these breakthrough new blended models that we have? If you're running one, you are collecting all of this data. Your teachers have access to it, your students have access to it, they're empowered by it, they're working, they're filling gaps, they're moving kids ahead. If you move kids ahead 1.7 years of growth or 2 years of growth in a single year, and the accountability system over here is measuring, it's showing you're not hitting the mark. If you're making 2 years of growth over here, you're running parallel universes of accountability systems, right? You're doing what is right for kids and student-centered learning, and you will get them up because you're accelerating them. And once they fill those gaps, they accelerate. You can catch them up and get them successful, but you have to run this system, and this is the compliance-based system, and we have got to use this opportunity in time for policy, and the federal ESEA reauthorization will be looked at, maybe not in the next 12 months, but we have time to help show people that there is a new way based on competency education that we can unleash the creativity of our educators, we can help support our school leaders with an accountability system aligned around student-centered learning that focuses on accountability for every child, and an assessment regime that allows systems, plural, of assessments and modular throughout the year, so we're not locking kids in against this wall. We have to keep them in their zone of proximal development, and we need an accountability system in the way that we think about quality assurance in every other industry. Entry point benchmark, per unit of time, how much growth has happened. Then we can see productivity. Then we can actually see what is happening on the ground. And there is no reason we can't do this. We can. We can make this happen. The other huge policy issue right now is the FCC is opening up, looking at improving the E-rate program for telecommunications access. We have got to improve broadband and internet connectivity in our schools and in our learning environments for students. And this is the opportunity that we have. So technology infrastructure is a huge push on policy. And last piece is, how do we help improve leadership development programs, teacher leadership development programs, to be prepared for blended and online and competency-based models. We have got to improve teacher training and leadership training, colleges of ed, programs that support colleges of ed, looking at next generation learning models, because they're today. And we have too few administrators and teachers coming out ready to teach in these environments that are highly personalized and student-centered. And so there are some exciting new trends too in state policy. And this is a nod to the Louisiana course choice policy, where you have students that are eligible, if they are in schools where they cannot access courses, to a whole range of courses that include traditional courses, blended courses, and online courses. Course choice is an exciting new development that is taking hold in several states, including Utah, Louisiana, Minnesota has course choice, Florida has some forms of course choice, and there are many other states looking at this right now. And what gets tied to course choice are innovative new funding models, fractional backpacking of funding, performance-based funding models. We're working on a major research report right now on performance-based funding. Quality remains a huge concern in this field, and it's tied back to that notion of, if we're in blended and online environments and we have access to that student learning data every day, why can't we be more transparent about what's working and what's not? And this is a call to action in the field. We seek to be in a place where all students have access to high quality learning models. But right now, we can't tell which of these models are more effective than others or most effective. We must move to a model of quality assurance where we are measuring quality based on outcomes and how they relate to those inputs. So we need to know student knowledge upon entry. We need to look at the individual student growth. If I say individual student growth like 14 different times, it's a focus. Individual student growth. And upon exit of that program, what that student knowledge is. Then we can roll that up and start to evaluate programs. So this is a groundbreaking report we released in the last year, and we think that districts will use this to put in metrics to ask their partnerships when they run RFPs. We're hoping that authorizers and states in doing oversight will start asking for these quality assurance metrics. And last but not least, a call to action through the iNACOL research agenda, which we have developed with the field, for more research and development on what works for kids, what the enrollment data is, what the demographic data is in different programs, what works best in terms of practice, how practice ties to policy, funding models. We've got to get more research and development in this field, and we will try to help accelerate that and move that. And so I won't dwell. Another article came out last week in the New York Times on the US and the international comparisons. We know we're 32 in math. We know that 1 in 6 American adults is among the lowest level of literacies of all developed countries in the world. These are unacceptable. But I think we have to remain optimistic because we can, in our lifetime, change what is possible for this generation of Americans that is coming up today. I've seen it. I know you've seen it. I know your teachers have seen it. And all of you have students where you have changed the lives, changed the trajectory of the lives of the students. And we can do that for many, many more students, and we can do this in our lifetime. And I am committed to it, and I know so many of you are committed to it, making these changes, or you would not be here about the transformation to student-centered learning. But if Batu Shig in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia can get a perfect score in a sophomore level MIT class, there are thousands more Batu Shigs and children in our communities who we can engage, get involved in their interests, and give them what they need to be successful in this society. This is a group of kids down in Costa Rica just a few weeks ago at the Global World Forum. And these students were all coming together to help do that Code Dojo, where they try to solve the world's problems using information technology. And they call it the information sharing system that we now know of as the internet was founded on the principle of freedom. It is a freedom that permits open and free discourse, innovation and collaboration on interconnected networks, freedom that allows for constant expansion. As a result, we live in a world where technology enables pervasive, perpetual social change, and young people are at the forefront of driving that change. So UN Secretary General said at the Global Youth Summit, he encourages us to imagine a future where everyone has access to enough food, to an education, and to the energy required to develop jobs in a robust economy. Our challenge is to use information and communication technologies as a platform for that positive change. And all of you are here. Together, we must use that platform for positive change for our students. Back to that Martin Luther King Jr. quote, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." In our lifetime, we have the opportunity to help bend that arc for justice for our children. And together, I hope we are able to do this. I am committed to do it. Thank you for being here. Thank you. And now those who can help enabling the opening of these opportunities and support that move to equity, access, and justice are policy leaders, the state and at the federal level. It is my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelists for our keynote policy panel, Driving an Innovative Policy Roadmap Towards the Transformation of Student Learning. We're truly honored to have with us today these policymakers from the U.S. Department of Education, those who have served in state legislatures, and in state agencies. All three are tireless advocates for the transformation of our system. They are challenging the status quo to create a better future for our students. First, I am pleased to welcome State Representative Alicia Morgan. She is serving in her 6th term in the Georgia House of Representatives. She serves on the House Education Committee, is Vice Chair of the Innovation Subcommittee on Education, and serves on the Appropriations and Health and Human Services Committee. An expert in her own right, she consults for the U.S. Department of Education, evaluating applications for programs such as Race to the Top and Promised Neighborhoods. Earlier in her career, she organized young people for the Alliance of Justice to stop gun violence in their communities. She graduated from Spelman College and is a proud mom to her first grader, Layla. Next, we are pleased to have, thank you. Next, we are pleased to have Senator Richard Crandall, who is appointed now the Director of the Wyoming Department of Education on August 1st. Rich is the proud father of 6 girls and 1 son, Rhett, who's here with us today. And it fuels his passion for education, especially the use of technology in education. Previously, Senator Crandall served as the Senate Education Chair in the Arizona Senate, and before that as the Education Chair in the Arizona House of Representatives. As a lawmaker, Rich was instrumental in expanding rules around distance education, online learning, blended learning, competency-based instruction, and personalized learning. Rich has a BS and Master's in Accounting from BYU and an MBA from the University of Notre Dame. Welcome, Senator Crandall. Thank you. Finally, I am honored to introduce Jim Shelton, the Acting Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of Education. In this role, he has been a tireless advocate for innovation and managed a number of programs. He manages a broad range of management, policy, and program functions. Previously, he served as the head of the Office of Innovation and Improvement. You know those I3 grants, right? Earlier in his career, he worked as program director for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation at the New Schools Venture Fund and was an education entrepreneur and consultant. Jim holds a bachelor's degree in computer science from Atlanta's Morehouse College, as well as master's degrees in business administration and education from Stanford University. He lives in his hometown, Washington, D.C., with his wife and 2 sons. And last, to moderate the panel, iNACOL's own new Vice President for Federal and State Policy, Maria Worthen. Maria leads iNACOL's work to transform our education system through policy and advocacy. She started her career as a preschool teacher and has served as education policy advisor to the chairman of the U.S. Senate on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, the HELP Committee, as well as congressional liaison and program officer at the U.S. Department of Education. She holds a BA from Smith College and a master's in social work from Washington University in St. Louis. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. How are you this morning? Awesome. I am so excited to be here. This is my first iNACOL Blended and Online Learning Symposium, and I'm especially excited to be here with this incredible panel of lawmakers, policymakers, and advocates. So let's get going. I think we're going to have a great conversation this morning. So the 3 of you are each in your own right incredible advocates for kids, for transformation of our education system through innovation. Can you share, and let's start with Jim, can you please share your story about what drew you to these issues and how you got to where you are today?
Sure, I'm really happy to do that, but I wanted to actually demonstrate the reason that I got into this. Would everybody just please stand up for just a half a second? Just stand up. Look around. All right, now sit back down. So there's a lot of reasons that I've gotten into this work. One of them is because a lot of the things that we actually know about learning, they actually never show up in settings of learning. So one of them is when adults sit down for more than 45 minutes, they are done. They are done. The opportunity to teach them something is almost lost. And what we find is that whether we are talking about the impact of the learning sciences, whether neuroscience, behavioral science, biological science, whether it's what we know about the cognitive science and how you actually figure out what experts need to know, if you figure out what we know about actually what it takes to apply personalized learning and to actually tailor instruction to individual students, what we know about how to get that 2 standard deviations of improvement, very few of those things, even in the context of those things that we could have done all along without technology catching up, have ever gotten to the classroom, have ever gotten to the students that need it most. So my background, I grew up in DC. I had the opportunity to get a great education, which was very different than most of my friends. Therefore, my life took a very different trajectory, and I always felt like I needed to do something about that. I had the opportunity to start off in technology. I wanted to be in education, but my mom told me I had to go and make some money first. I didn't quite work that out, but I did get to follow my passion. And what I found is that by being able to start in technology and have a little business background, I've developed a perspective that says that in almost every sector, innovation happens in the context of an ecosystem. It happens when the context, as Susan said, is right, when innovation and R&D are invested in properly, when they actually get out to the people in the field that need to use them most, and most importantly, that that feedback loop is there so that you get continuous improvement on what's happening with the folks who are using it every day. The reason I sit in the position that I sit today is because one of the things that I noticed is that our context was never quite right, and that policy context was going to be critically important. It was going to be not only important to realizing the vision, but making sure that it happened in a way that was done equitably. What we know is that this opportunity is here and will be here. The question is, will it be here for everyone? And what will happen in the interim stages if we don't find ways to close the gap for the kids who are least likely to get access to the resources? My son has had a laptop for a really long time. The question is, who else's kids are going to have access to that kind of opportunity? And what are we going to do to make sure it's worthwhile for them to have it? Thanks.
Thank you. Alicia, how did you come to your interest in education and become a leader in your state on these
Sure.
issues?
Well, good morning, first of all, to everyone. I'm from the South, so when I say good morning, that means you say good morning, too. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, there we go. Thank you for this opportunity to be here. So I got involved really in education as a youth organizer. I started being active in the NAACP when I was 14, and so I've always been an advocate for young people and felt like there was a role for young people to be at the center of leadership and creating change. And so after graduating college, I moved to a community and continued to be involved and decided after working with, as you heard in my bio, young people around the southern region on the issue of gun violence, that there was still more that I needed to do, particularly in the area of policy making. And so as I worked on juvenile justice or any other issue, I always came back to the root of this all is having great education. I thought about my own life experience growing up in Florida and understanding, much like Jim said, you know, because of my educational opportunities, it completely changed my life trajectory. It was my mother who, you know, didn't know about school choice policy, but decided that I needed to go to a magnet school, performing arts schools. She advocated for me to have the best educational opportunities. And so eventually when I ran for office, and there's a long story there, running at the age of 23, education continued to be at the forefront of everything that I was doing. I got involved in online learning and blended learning because of a now very good friend who's in the audience, Comenich Brooken, thank you very much, who was working on some policy in the legislature, and it probably was 7 or 8 years ago. And so we had a bill that would have allowed for more online learning in the state, and quite frankly, I had not heard much about what online learning was. Certainly blended learning was not a concept in my mind then. And so the vote came, or was about to come, and no one could answer my questions. And so I decided that I would abstain from the vote, and that was kind of unheard of because you just kind of vote whether you know sometimes or not. And so Comenich came to me after the meeting, and she sat down, and we had this great conversation. It was really the first time that I'd even been exposed to the concept. And so there's the first thing. It's so important as for policymakers to hear from real people who are doing this, to develop those relationships, to help us connect. Sometimes we don't make good policy decisions because we're not exposed to good policy and how it works in practice. And so the long story short, a couple of years later, I then had a child. And we all know that life changes when you have your own child. It's one thing to talk about policy and to talk about education, how important it is, but when you're living it every day and you're making those decisions for your own family, you realize, hey, I only have one shot here. I don't have 15 or 20 years to try to fix education. I've got right now. And so from that point on, every day when I wake up in the morning, it's about what can I do to make a better educational opportunity for Layla and for all the kids in Georgia and quite frankly in this country. And I do it with a sense of urgency because I only get one shot, and parents in my state, in our country, in our world get one shot to educate our child. So that's what's driven my commitment. The last thing I want to mention is that this is difficult work from a policymaker point of view. I think particularly when we talk about choice or doing anything outside of what is in the traditional system, sometimes it comes with great consequence. And so I want to say to any of my colleagues who are out there in legislatures, or if you know legislators who are at the forefront of providing choice for parents or providing online learning for students, to thank them and appreciate them, because this is difficult work to do and requires a great deal of courage. And we need support, we need encouragement, and we have to have other individuals who are willing to run for office and to support those to do this great work on behalf of kids.
Thank you. Rich, what drives you? How have you come to be chairman of the Senate Education Committee in Arizona and now director of the Department of Education in Wyoming?
Well, thank you, Maria. I appreciate it so much to be here. This is an amazing opportunity. When I went to my first iNACOL conference 5 years ago, I never thought I'd then be sitting up here. But because of the things I learned, and just to go back to, Susan made the comment about kind of the length of time this transformation, quoting Martin Luther King, that this will happen. I think it's going to happen very, very quickly. If I can be here in 5 years just because of a couple of policies we got to pass that made a big change, all of you can have a significant impact in a very short amount of time. And it's kind of neat because you're going to see, as you go through that catalog, I saw several people sitting out there by that one little bar going through their catalogs, circling the sessions they were going to attend. There's some ideas that are going to spring from here that are just going to catch fertile ground when you get back home. And a year or two from now, you'll be presenting at a session something you did. That's what makes this so exciting. For me, it comes back to the personal side. I have 7 children, 6 girls and a son. My son begged me to take him away from the home for a weekend. And so he came, and it's been kind of funny because last night I said, hey, son, run up to the room, get my cell phone, and then come down and meet me at the fountain. I meant the fountain ice cream parlor. He thought he meant the fountain in the middle. For 40 minutes, I'm like, where is that kid? It does not take that long. Rhett and I, we decided that we were going to go scuba diving at Epcot. For those who don't know, they have this thing called Dive Quest, where you can scuba dive with the sharks and the turtles and everything. So we did that Saturday, so that meant we had to be certified. So about 3 months ago, we decided to be scuba certified. Now, Rhett has some strengths and some weaknesses. One, I will doubt he will sit through this entire presentation of this panel before he walks off somewhere. But to be scuba certified, you have to take a class first, and luckily it's offered online. And when Susan said A, B, or try again, that's exactly how the scuba certification course works, because it's so critical to your long-term safety when you're diving. And so I did it with my 4 youngest children, and Rhett just raced right through it. It was the first time he had really had an online course, age 10, his first online course. And he missed several the first chapter, a few less the second chapter. But he finished long before anybody in the family because of that ability to try again. This sounds a little bit like I need to talk negative for just a quick second so you understand the difference. My family has not had a chance to move over to Cheyenne yet. It was too late in the summer to make that big move, so they're still at their one school. It happens to be in Utah right now. And I had my first opportunity for a parent-teacher conference about a month ago. And luckily, the teacher did not know my role. She didn't know that I worked in education also. So we're just talking, going through, and she's telling me what his strengths are and what his weaknesses are. And I have his grades in front of me. And I'm like, well, how can that be one of his weaknesses? He's got an A- in that subject. And then I looked a little deeper, and I saw that he got 30 points extra for running the 3K at school. He got 20 points extra for bringing in some cans for the canned food drive. Now, I don't want to knock anything because those are worthy causes, but you cannot substitute points on academic achievement for those things. And so he's got almost straight A's, but it's because of these extra credit pieces. So I said, hey, one thing, I've learned from this scuba experience that my boy thrives in blended learning. What opportunities does he have in your classroom? Keep in mind there's 1 to 35 in this classroom also. And she just says, hey, I apologize in advance, Mr. Cranley, he's not going to get the personal time that you're thinking of. We do take them down to the computer lab twice a week where they get to work on keyboarding. Well, for anyone who's at this conference, that hurts. So I did what any policymaker does that happens to know a few vendors. And there's about 6 in this room. And I won't call them out because I don't want to show favoritism, but you know who you are. Hey, I know you've got a pretty cool adaptive middle school math program. Can I pay some money and try it for a summer? And they all say the same, no, you can't pay any money. We'll just let you try it with your kids. It goes back to what Jim just said. That's not fair. In fact, my wife kind of hates it when I do that because she says, you know, other kids don't have access to those things like you do, like your kids do. That's the point of this conference. And to the next question, I want to talk about why Wyoming is. You're going to see some things happen in Wyoming with the people we have here that will blow your doors off over the next 24 months. But I'll answer that for another question.
That's a great segue. This work of transformation takes such big vision and such great courage to push the envelope. Like you said, Alicia, this is tough work, and we need to thank the lawmakers and policymakers that are doing that work every day, challenging the status quo. So I'm curious to know, what is your vision for a transformed education system where every student has the opportunity to be successful, prepared for college and career? Jump in.
What Susan said.
Right.
I mean,
and how do we get there?
I mean, Susan laid out, I think, a really fantastic framework for all of us to think about as we go through the next several days, and frankly, for the years to come. The question is, how do we actually create the context for that to happen, and what role does each of us play in it? And I think the framework is great. I want to talk about it in a slightly different order, right? The standards piece is critically important, and the fact that the country has moved towards getting the standards right is not only important for competitiveness and all that good stuff, it is also an essential element to the equity question, especially when you start to allow students to move at their own pace, to take different pathways. If we're not really clear about what the end outcome expectation is, we know our history in this country is that kids wind up in different places. And so getting really clear about those standards and how we're going to validate that they've actually mastered them as a part of this work is essential, not only to the excellence mission, not only to the student voice and choice piece, but also to actually achieving equity as we move through this work. The second thing is the enabling policy set, whether it's the competency base, which is all controlled at the state level, my colleagues will talk about, whether it's the funding systems that allow you to actually move resources based on that kind of competency-based progression, to access other pathways when the pathway you're in is not working for you, either at the school or the course level. Those policy sets are critical to put in place. They are controlled at the state level. The context can be set for them at the federal level to make it easier for states to move in that direction. But in the end, those decisions have to happen at the local level. And this is going to seem odd that I focus on this, but you've heard it a couple of times. I don't want you to thank your representatives that support that work. I want you to defend your representatives that support that work. I was on a set of emails this weekend, excuse me for digressing for just 1 second, where there's a leader who I will not name who is going to get called up this week, probably and asked for his resignation. And he's going to be asked for his resignation because he was courageous, because he asked to do something different, because he expected something more for children, because he tried something new. And it's not right. It is not right. And it is not the fault of the people who are in his opposition. It is our fault for being too dang quiet. And it's happening everywhere. Sorry. I'll leave that. So it is going to take courage, and it is going to take people actually mobilizing to support those people with courage.
So first, I want to say thank you to the United States Department of Education. If you think about 7, 8 years ago, the Federal Department of Education was this regulatory agency, right? And we had No Child Left Behind, and everyone was afraid of who made AYP and who didn't, and all this stuff was happening in states. Now you imagine, you look at the U.S. Department of Education, and they have spurred innovation in this country. I love the fact that I have read in the past applications for Race to the Top, particularly at the district level. And looking at the level of innovation and the creativity and the things that are happening, particularly in the areas of personalized learning for students. That would not have happened without the leadership of Jim Shelton, of Arnie Duncan, and lots of others at the U.S. Department of Education. So I want to take a moment to say thank you. And so what it has also done at the state level is created an environment in which we have to think differently about education. Now, the question is, which states are moving at the pace that we want them to move? When I think about what is happening in our state, the word that comes to mind is that we have to reimagine what we're doing in education. We finally passed our law last year that allows for devices in classrooms. Because we still have educators, yay! Because we still have educators and parents and lots of other folks who are saying, leave your cell phones outside. Don't bring them inside the classroom. But here are students, my daughter included, and if I have to bring her to a town hall meeting or something, she's going to be near me, she's going to have my phone or my iPad, and she will be completely fine for the next 45 minutes to an hour doing whatever she's doing. So kids spend all of this time on technology of some sort, and then they get in the classroom and we close the door and we don't want anything to do with technology. And so we've got to get to a place where we are walking into classrooms and seeing devices in the hands of students who are learning, who are curious, who are asking questions, who are part of their own educational experience, who can look at longitudinal data systems and know, as Susan said earlier, what their goals are and how they're going to get to them from day to day, from week to week. And so when we talk about, our vision for education, as much of my work that has been in school choice, honestly, it's only going to help, 10% of kids who are in my state. Now we've got to create a system in which 90% of students are having access to blended learning opportunities and online learning, and that we're using technology not as a sidebar, something that we hope to do, but something that's a part of their everyday learning experience. And so that's where we need to go, and that's where we need to go pretty quickly so that we can make education more relevant. We know why kids are dropping out of school. We know why kids don't find education exciting. And so when we know these things, we now have to do the things necessary to bring education to the 21st century. And that's how we're going to prepare them with critical thinking skills, with the curiosity to ask questions. That's how we're going to prepare them, yes, using Common Core, but as importantly for career in college.
Thank you. Rich.
Thank you. Good. One of the things that has helped transform this the most for myself is finding mentors, those who truly believe, and this was not a demonstration project, but I told you my son wouldn't last until my next comments. He's over here somewhere eating there. But there are individuals who are the experts in this field who took me under their wing to show me a better way. I was not, when I was on the Mesa School Board in Arizona, I was not a blended learning expert by any means. But Michael Horn, Heather Staker, Clayton Christensen, of course Susan with iNACOL. Giselle Huff is here, the matriarch of blended learning, everything she does. Tom Vander Ark and his team are here. And then Steve Bowen, the former state school chief of Maine. People who have done this before. And what's interesting, they're so excited to share their ideas. I saw Tom Vander Ark last week out in Boston. I said, Tom, I've got the most incredible teachers, administrators, school board members in Wyoming. If you had the ultimate fertile ground, what would be your top 10 wish list? And he said, Rich, I'll have it to you in your inbox by tonight. And sure enough, the sucker puts together this. In fact, a couple of them like, holy cow, I'm not sure we're quite ready to go there. But he put this thing up, if I could put anything in place, it'd be these 10 things. So that kind of sets the ground for it. I was very fortunate to be surrounded by people who wanted to try. So when I got the call from Governor Meade for the opportunity to go to Wyoming, I'll be real blunt, I had never been to Wyoming. And as I looked at my Outlook contact list, which I thought was huge, not one name was in Wyoming. So I had a chance to interview with the state board, some lawmakers, the governor's office, and every one of them said the same thing, said, we put a lot of money into education, and our results have been flat for well over 10 years. We're not willing to accept that anymore. We'd like to try a different, I don't want to say try a different path, but we're not happy with the results we have. Let me ask a quick question, a little bit like what Jim did earlier. If you're sitting at a table or a couple tables with a school board member, an administrator, and teachers from a single district, raise your hands. Okay, if you want to know who's presenting in 2 years, it will be folks from those tables. And I'm very fortunate because if I count last year's conference and this, I've got several districts who have brought school board members, administrators, and teachers to the iNACOL conference. They will go back and they will take some of their best ideas that they saw and find a way to implement those. That's going to be the next big transformation. Real quick, tell just a 30-second story and then be done. There's a little parable I tell. It's called the parable of the two lamps. And there was a student back in 1890 in college, and this lamp salesman comes by like 2 in the afternoon. And he says, hey, I'm a lamp salesman, but they just get to talking, just a casual conversation, and they just hit it off until it starts to get dark, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Then finally it's dark, and the lamp salesman says, well, hey, show me your lamp. And the student's a little cocky, says, oh, man, I've got the best lamp out there in the marketplace. He lights it, and the salesman says, that is a really good lamp. You keep it well trimmed, it's clean, it does burn bright. Do you mind if I show you my lamp now? And the student says, yeah, you can, but I'm not going to buy it. He lights that lamp, and instantly this thing is 4 times brighter than his lamp. He buys it immediately. The reason I share that story is everybody who works in education, everybody who works in education feels that what they're doing is the best thing for education and for students. You can't go someplace and attack somebody else's education program. You have to bring the bigger, brighter lamp and let them see. And that's why sometimes we get a little bit of resistance when we say we want to bring this in. We do it with such a full force that we kind of scare people. They need to see these projects, these incredible results. Susan must have showed 10 or 15 of them during her presentation. Take those back and show those. And that's why I'm so excited to have so many great, I think we brought 45 teachers and administrators from Wyoming. We left a couple back home to teach this week, but we brought most of them here, and very excited about that. Thanks.
Can I just add 3 quick things? Because of timing. One, obviously, the Connect Ed initiative, and in particular the E-rate component, the FCC is moving on that very quickly. Comments have come back in. Pay attention. Pay attention to, as it moves forward, make sure that you're clear about the folks who actually express some opposition or try and cloud the process and get it tangled up in other things that might slow it down. Second thing I'd like us to really pay close attention to, because, and I talk about this every time, it is the soft underbelly of our movement, which is people who aren't performing, who are actually growing quickly. If we allow the part of the market to grow quickly that doesn't do a good job for kids, whether online or charters, we've seen this movie before too many times, it will hurt everyone. It will hurt everyone. We have to self-police. We have to not be put in a position where we are defending things that we know are not right. And so I implore us, if we want this movement to flourish, we have got to deal with our poor performers ourselves first, and then support when the actions come down to deal with them from others. And then the third thing is, in the end, the devices and the connectivity I think are going to get there. The question is going to be the sheer game of quality content and resources. What are people, and kids in particular, spending their time doing when they're online? They will fill their time. The question is with what? That's ours to win. But it is only up to us to make sure it happens, and I think it's going to take significant investment in R&D to make sure it happens well. Thanks.
Thank you. We are a little short on time. We're going to go over a few minutes, but I'd like to start with some closing thoughts from our panelists. What, Alicia, how can everyone in the audience today, when they go back home, how can they partner with policymakers, become advocates in their own right to push the envelope? Can we all do this?
Absolutely. You must all do this. As I said in my opening remarks, there's a great opportunity here to educate policymakers. Don't assume because the world that you live in or are interested in that everyone is there with you. I have colleagues in my legislature who are smart and wonderful and still don't know how to turn on a computer. And so if you think about those are the folks who will decide if the policy groundwork is set so that you can bring blended learning or whatever it is that you're trying to do in your state, that's going to be a significant challenge. And so spend the time. If you are a practitioner, if you are in sales, whatever capacity you serve in, spend the time talking to policymakers, not when the bill is coming right now or when we're in session right now, but in the off season, when we have time to listen, when we're paying attention to other things, when we are looking for good information. Don't miss opportunities to take policymakers into settings where online learning is happening. Help them to see and understand what this is, that this is not, to Jim's point, we are not pushing products or services that are not quality. We're trying to create opportunities for students so that they are in more personalized learning environments where we are using tools that help us get to where we want students to get. And so use this opportunity to partner, to create relationships, to meet with legislative groups and other organizations to talk about this work. And then the other thing that I would say, because I probably don't have a whole lot of time either, know that you are powerful and that you have a voice because you do this work every day. And don't leave it to other people, lobbyists or other folks, to make the case for you. But if you have kids, if you are providing online education, if you are an educator, whatever it is that you do, know that you have power and influence to impact the process. Because if we don't have the state policies and state laws in place, if we don't have state board members who know the right rules to put in place, all of this stuff is for naught. We've got to have the environment in place to give us the opportunity to do this. And so know that you are powerful, know that you have influence, and know that your voice is absolutely critical to move this work forward. Thank you.
Let me go next on that. Thank you.
I love it when they clap. Thank you.
Boy, are you right on the money. I can tell you have many years' experience. I want to, for the best way to illustrate exactly the question you asked is my biggest failure as a state lawmaker. I had the opportunity to attend a blended learning policy conference at Stanford about 2.5 years ago. And I decided I was going to run the ultimate course choice bill. I didn't even know exactly what that meant, but I got to go to the Hoover Institute at Stanford, and Jim was there. And I'm just kind of this rookie in the audience there, and I have this bill kind of drafted in part, and I want Arizona to be #1. And so I don't care about anything else, I just want us to be #1. So I put the bill up, and I even asked, I said, do you mind if we take 30 minutes here at this conference? Because I'm surrounded by experts here, and just beat the heck out of this bill. So we put it up on an overhead, and literally everyone in the room said, well, Rich, you really need to have this for funding, this piece here, you need to have a feedback loop, everything. Come away with what really is probably the top bill around blended learning because everybody had input into it. So I get back, start working the individuals I need. I know I have to have in Arizona 31 votes in the House and 16 votes in the Senate, and of course I've got to have the governor sign. But all I care about is I want to be #1. This is a very competitive field here. We're all cocky. And I want my blended learning.
Not all of us.
Some are in it for the right reasons. Some just want personal glory and fame. And so, and I'll illustrate this point. Get the bill through the Senate. We'll make a few changes to it. The districts realize, that may not be the best for us, Rich, but we'll go along because we're afraid of what you might do to us on some other bill. So we'll support you. Go along, get it passed through the House, gets up to the governor's office. And we always finish session, then we have 10 days before 10 days that she has to sign or veto bills after session ends. On the 10th day, she vetoes my bill. All the work I had done for months and months and months, the whole experience, she vetoed it. And the reason is because the department had called over and said, we don't have the capacity or the capability to implement Senator Crandall's bill. I was so cocky and arrogant that I said, for me, it's either all or nothing. If I had gone over and met with the state superintendent and said, you know, why don't I wait till next year for this piece and just accept, you know, this win this year and then something next year, we would have had an incredible, we would have been ahead of Louisiana for course choice. I commend them for putting through an incredible bill. They lead the country now, along with Howard Stevenson in Utah in course choice. But that's my one little piece of advice. Don't worry about getting everything the first year you go to the legislature. Get a few things demonstrated it works. It will build so rapidly that it'll be incredible where you end up in 3 or 4 years.
Jim, I'm going to give you the last word. We are moving towards hopefully a reauthorization of ESEA, whether that's this year, next year, 3 years from now. I'm not gonna ask you when you think it's gonna happen.
Yeah, please don't.
But you know, we've got all the. We're talking about new learning models. We're talking about competency education. We're talking about the power of blended and online learning to transform education. But all these conversations have not yet really bubbled up outside of your office and Arnie Duncan's office to the broader conversation of federal policymakers. How do we make that happen? And what issues do we need to have our eye on?
I think 3 things are really important. One is we need to know when our issues align with things that other people are pushing for other reasons, right? So the notion of the importance of focusing on growth is a principle that many people have as a focus of for reauthorization of ESEA. That's going to be important to us. We should just get on and encourage it to make sure it happens. Things like competency-based are things that most people don't understand, but it actually is fairly intuitive once you start to understand what it means. Those are the kind of things where there's not going to be a ton of opposition. There just won't be a level of understanding. And so making sure people understand is going to be an important part of that. But there's a third piece of this, which is, and you've heard Alicia and Rich say this in a couple of different ways. I say it this way, which is some people cannot imagine it until they can see it. They just cannot imagine it until they can see it. And so if you have not invited your delegation to come and speak to your students, don't invite them to come and see your model of your school. Invite them to come and speak to your students, or to speak to a gathering of your parents, or to do the graduation speech. Whatever it is that's going to get them there to learn more, and in the process, they're going to learn more about what you're doing and see what it looks like and hear their constituents say, this is the best thing that ever happened to my child. That is the most important thing you can do to make sure that when they go back, all the evidence, all the papers, all the great reports that are written, they will hold those while they talk about what they want to do with the policy, but what will have made them move is the experience they had with you and the story you told them. So give them the stories to tell. That's the most important thing you can do. Thanks.
Please join me in thanking this amazing panel. And at this point, we're going to move to our 10 a.m. sessions. And thank you. Thank you so much.